All right, today we're talking all about gain staging. What we're going to cover today is a nice simple process that if you follow, you'll get correct and accurate gain staging every time. Whether you're mixing stems, loops, samples, or your own recordings through your interface, this will cover all of that. This is not an analog video, it's primarily just about how to do this correctly in the modern DAW. So let's get on into it. Simply put, gain staging is getting the correct levels for recording and mixing to optimize the process. Whether that's the correct mixing levels to hit your master bus or the correct track levels to hit your plugins. Before we start our mix, we have to gain stage correctly to optimize both of those things, how the signal hits the plugins and how the signal goes over to the master bus. Now, in the old analog days, the signal to noise ratio was very important, but in the modern DAW, it really isn't. So the old mentality of maximizing your recording levels as close to the red line without clipping is no longer relevant. In the modern DAW, even though we have 32-bit floats that prevent clipping, there's still a couple cases where that can be a problem, and we're going to talk about that. But most importantly, the gain staging is necessary to optimize the signal strength as it goes into our plugins. So let's dive into a mix and talk about how to gain stage correctly from the get. So this is a brand new mix from scratch. So whether you've just imported a bunch of stems, samples, loops, or your own recordings through an interface, it all starts off the same way. Now, when recording through an interface, the ideal level to set on your fader is going to be somewhere around -10, -12 dB. Like I said, there's no reason to record your signal as hot as possible and just keep it below clipping. It's actually more advantageous to you in a modern DAW to aim for that -10, -12 dB range for recording. Now, that said, when you start off your mix, you want to gain stage before you adjust any of your faders, before you do anything on the master bus. You want to start off with all of your faders at 0, including on your master bus. Now, pretty much the only thing that happens before you start gain staging would be normalizing audio. Most DAWs have a normalize audio option, so you'll see that some of the signal strength on some of these tracks is very, very light. Like if I blow this one up here, this is the ride on the drums. And it's a really light signal. And in the modern DAW, that's fine. This is not a problem. But if you want to increase the gain on this track so you can see the waveform better while you're editing and mixing, most DAWs offer something like this. Like in Studio One, you right-click and hit Normalize Audio. And there you go. You see how this increased it dramatically, but it still keeps the peaks below clipping. But this is real simple and easy, and I recommend doing this. Normalize your audio before you gain stage because you want to have more waveform to look at. You just got to make sure that these little spikes here are not clipping, that they're staying at least a good 3 to 6 dB below the clip, and then we'll gain stage from there. But that's the first thing you want to do is normalize all of your audio, and then we're ready to gain stage. Now, you can use clip gain to do your gain staging, but I don't recommend it because clip gain is useful while you're mixing. And I will also link to a video that I have if you want to know more about clip gain. And clip gain is often confused with gain staging, and they're kind of related, but not really the same thing. But if you're not aware of clip gain, then yeah, check out this video because it is also a really powerful tool. Now, the quick, easy way to gain stage your mix is to simply select all of your tracks, and then I would turn down the gain knob on one of them, and because they're all highlighted, all of the gain knobs would turn down. So what we would do is go to the loudest part in a song, like a chorus, and hit play, and you'll see on my master fader that we're peaking over 0. And then we would turn down all of these gains collectively until we get down to about -18 dB. That's what we're aiming for, is about -18 dB peak on the master fader meter. Now, if your DAW doesn't have input gain controls like this, what you can do is pick up a free plugin like this one. This is called Stereo Channel from Sleepy Time. And this is a free download, and it's a really handy VU meter that offers a lot of extra features that are really cool to have, and it will process mid-side, flip your polarity and stuff, but you can simply use this to do gain staging. So you could place one of these plugins as the first insert on every channel and always leave it at the top of your inserts, and you could simply adjust the gain with this knob. So whether your DAW has these input gain controls or not, you have that plugin as an option. But doing this all together, it totally works, but I don't think it's the best way. The best way is to go through your tracks one by one and turn them down till they're all operating at negative 18 dB on each track, basically adjusting each track according to its signal strength. So for example, this top track here in yellow is the snare drum. What I would do is solo out my snare track, hit play, and again I have this looped at like the loudest part of the song, and then I would turn down the input gain until my snare track was operating at about negative 18. Because some waveforms are stronger than others, it's actually better if you do this one track at a time. Some of them you might not need to turn down at all, some you might need to turn down further, but that's your safe bet for gain staging to set up your mix. Turn down your input gain on every track until they're all peaking at about negative 18 dB, somewhere in that ballpark. Now, the reason that's so important isn't just to leave yourself adequate headroom for beginning your mix, but modern plugins are operating at an input strength that's optimal at around negative 18 dB. The incorrect way to gain stage is to simply turn all of these faders down until you're operating at about negative 18 on the master bus. And the reason that's incorrect is because it doesn't solve the problem of the input level strength. The input level strength is what matters because after the input here at the top of the channel strip, the signal flows down through all of your plugins and through your onboard EQs and compressors and whatever is on your channel strip, and then down at the bottom, the fader is the output control. It is not the input or gain control. So that's what gain staging is adjusting your input or gain control to the optimal level. Now, once you've done that for all of your tracks and you've set them all at around negative 18 with the input gain, your master fader is probably going to be reading higher than negative 18, which isn't such a bad thing. If it's around negative 10, negative 12, you're probably fine. But if you need to, then you can drop your master fader down until you're operating closer to negative 18 dB. And you'll be off and running and ready to start your mix. And that's how you do proper gain staging, and it is very, very important. We got to make sure that our input signal is running at around negative 18, so when we start bringing on compressors and EQs and saturators, that we're hitting those plugins with the correct signal strength. Because you don't want to be clipping your plugins or driving too little or too strong of a signal into them. You want to keep it where they work optimally. But that's really all there is to it. This is a really, really important part of mixing that you don't want to overlook. Which brings me back to the 32-bit float built into your DAW. Yes, it's true that if this snare drum were to peak and go over the red line, that built-in float in most modern DAWs prevents it from actually clipping, but here's the real problem. The 32-bit float will prevent your DAW from clipping on any one signal going over the red line, but if two or more signals go over the red line on the channel strip fader meter at the same time, then you could be actually clipping on your master bus, and that's not the good kind of clipping. It's not like the clipping we get by a clipper plugin that we put on our snare. This is the bad kind of digital world clipping that you really do want to avoid. So if your kick and snare hit at the same time and both of them went over the red line on your channel strip meter, that could be a problem. This is one of the most important reasons for gain staging correctly, not to mention we need the correct signal input level for our plugins. Another thing that is no longer relevant in the modern DAW is getting your master fader meter to read as close to zero as possible, because a modern DAW is basically a noiseless platform. So let's say my meter was right here at negative 18 peak, and I sent that off to a mastering engineer, that is completely fine. The mastering engineer would simply turn it up. What the mastering engineer can't do is fix the clipping. If you're going over the red on your master fader, that's not good. And you're gonna make any mastering job really, really hard, and it's gonna be hard for them to clean up that clipping that you've created. So there's no need to get close to that zero line. Keep everything at a good 12, 18 dB down below the zero mark, and you can operate there just fine. And it won't be a signal to noise ratio issue. And the last thing to mention here is as you start bringing in your inserts, you want to make sure you're level matching. Now, if we go ahead and compress this snare, when the compressor's engaged, if the snare is 3 or 4 dB louder than it is without the compressor engaged, it's probably going to sound better. If you level match, so it's the same when the compressor is disengaged, then you'll be able to tell if it actually sounds better with the compression that you've applied. So that's the first reason. The second reason you want to level match all of the plugins and processing you do is to keep your signal on your master fader from creeping up and up and up as you mix. But that about covers it. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you're working with loops, stems, samples, or your own recordings through your interface. If you follow those simple steps, you'll have an on-target, on-point gain profile for every track, and you'll have set the stage for your mix, which I think is why they call it gain staging. But that's all there is to it. Hope you like that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to tackle. Hop over to Patreon and check out the free content preview over there and get involved in the Q&A if you want to support the channel. Check out the merch store if you want to pick up some mountain merch. And happy mixing, and I'll see you all on the next one.